Vă salut, suntem la SmartJob, podcastul Europa Liberă, dedicat vreme de câteva luni combaterii dezinformării, a știrilor false, a fake news-urilor. Un podcast sprijinit de către Fundația Konrad Adenauer. Pentru că da, împreună învățăm să ne apărăm mai bine. Alături de mine în studio este Martin Fornusek, Senior News Editor, The Kyiv Independent, Ukraine. Martin Fornusek, hello. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You came to Bucharest for an event organized by Friends for Friends Foundation, an event about fake news and disinformation. The Kyiv Independent, a Ukrainian English language online newspaper founded in November 2021, wish you many years ahead, by the way, by former employees of the Kyiv Post newspaper, just 3 months before the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, at the beginning, Martin Fornusek, it's very hard for me and for us to understand, it's impossible actually for us to understand, to figure out what it's like to live in Ukraine today, a country at war. So, help us better understand what life is like in Ukraine today.
Well, there are certain things that you never thought about before that become part of your daily routine when the country is at war. Like, for example, when you go to sleep, you never know if you'll end up waking up at 3 a.m. when the siren goes off and you learn from Telegram that there's a mass aerial strike heading your way. You spend the next 2 hours watching Telegram to learn if the missiles are going to Kyiv, Lviv, if it is necessary for you to go hide in a shelter or you can wait it out in bed. And everybody's sort of adapting to this. Like in our family, for example, we have a backpack where we have all the valuables and documents ready to grab quickly. We have all the clothes ready to be in within 10-15 minutes to be in the shelter, and it becomes sort of part of your everyday life. The same for blackouts. Like every winter, Russia launches mass attacks on energy infrastructure. They target power plants, and as a result, for much of the day, many households and businesses, they don't have electricity. So people adapted. Now, when there's winter, you hear buzzing of generators all around. In our Kiev office, we have also a charging device so we can function during the day. And this is just the new routine for everybody who's in Ukraine.
You're a Czech who lives in Ukraine for 2 years?
Yes.
Why Ukraine?
I would say that for many journalists who are foreigners and who came to Ukraine and to join the Kyiv Independent, it's sort of a calling, I think. Okay. It's I think that like the battle for democracy, to say it like this, is happening now in Ukraine. And I didn't want to sit on the sidelines and just watch it afar and let it become just news in the background. And I feel that I can do much more when I am personally in the country, where I can be in contact with the team and in contact with the people who are actually experiencing this. Mm-hmm. And I think it benefits greatly my work as a journalist to be there in the country and to like experience this with everybody else. And of course, I have personal connections. My wife is Ukrainian, my in-laws live in Ukraine, so there are multiple reasons.
Give us details. What is it like to be journalist in a country at war? I mean, how difficult is it for journalists to make their job in Ukraine?
So one thing is that you experience these difficulties as everybody else. You spend the night in the shelter like everybody else. But it's also your job to then wake up or like stay awake after that, go to the building that was hit, talk to the people who were directly affected by this, and just face the consequences of Russian aggression head on. And that is not to even mention my colleagues who are frontline journalists, who are embedded with frontline brigades, who know what it's like to be hiding from Russian drones, and who make close connections with the soldiers that they're interviewing, that they're reporting on, and they hear on a regular basis that one was killed, another was killed, or that a journalist they worked with a year ago, or a photojournalist they worked a year ago, was killed by a Russian drone. Mm-hmm. And it's just a huge emotional strain for everybody.
Is it hard for you to manage disinformation? Do you find this difficult or impossible in a country at war? For example, in Romania, we do not have an organization, an institution to combat disinformation. How is it like in Ukraine?
It's an uphill battle, definitely. Russia is spending massive resources into its propaganda machine, and it's just difficult to combat the sheer volume of the disinformation and misinformation that is spread on social media, on Telegram channel, and there was honestly a great hit to the just general fact-checking ecosystem of Ukraine with the shuttering of USAID. Because yes, for media, fact-checking is not profitable activity. It is public service in effect, and for many organizations relied on support of U.S. funding, European funding, and if that dries out while Russia increases the money that they pump into it, it becomes an uneven battle. On the other hand, one thing that is like place in our hand is that thanks to the aggression, even the broader world understands the importance of Russian disinformation. And this kind of like that even in Romania, even in other countries, debunking misinformation, disinformation about Ukraine is one of the key topics. Like even in Czech Republic, for example, all the fact checkers know that debunking disinformation about Ukraine is one of the main focuses that they have to work on, because it's right now one of the most critical aspects of Russian disinformation.
You mentioned Telegram. Why is it hard to fight disinformation on Telegram? We know that many Ukrainians take their informations from Telegram.
Well, it's impossible to regulate, of course, and unfortunately, if you compare, for example, what's the following of an average serious media outlet on a Telegram, usually it's like a couple of tens of thousands. But when you look at some major channels which, let's say, don't have any editorial oversight, it's unclear who owns them, and they produce a lot of content that is just misleading or untrue, the readership goes to hundreds of thousands. So there's just like the amount of readership that goes to these, let's say, low quality media news sources is incomparably larger than what we can cover. And on the other hand, Ukraine as a state cannot restrict it, they cannot ban it, because at the same time Telegram is an important source of information for a lot of people who are, let's say, in occupied territories. Let's say, for example, normally journalists would use Signal if they want to communicate something like that's classified, that they don't want the people to find out. But in the occupied territories, Russian soldier can stop you at any moment. If they see you have a Signal on your phone, you're immediately a suspicious person. But Telegram, everybody has Telegram. And it's anonymous, you can encrypt it. So there are still ways why this app is important for many people, and why there is no easy solution to this problem.
Okay. Let's talk about what are the main disinformation topics in Ukraine, of course, in Eastern Europe or globally. You said that this event organized by Friends for Friends Foundation, the first thing that makes Ukrainian society vulnerable to Russian propaganda is, of course, proximity. What else?
I think that in this proximity, you can think of like different topics that are actually covered by this. And it's just the history, the shared history, the centuries of subjugation where Russia had a chance to like mold or form how they want Ukrainian identity to exist, how they want to influence what language will people speak, what religion will they follow. And this really helped them to make the country susceptible to Russian narratives for decades, if not centuries. I think that what changed was that with the full-scale invasion, a lot of these grand narratives that were rooted in culture and history became less effective. Like you can't think that somebody is your brother nation if they are shooting rockets at you. What they're doing now and how the society is becoming vulnerable now is, of course, fears and anxieties of war. And Russia can use this very well. And I think one of the main topics of disinformation now is mobilization. So mobilization is a real issue. There are a lot of men, military-age men, are trying to avoid conscription, and there are real cases of enlistment officers carrying out corruption or carrying out or abusing their employees or even recruits. These are real cases, and that's why it's so easy for Russian propaganda to target this topic, to amplify the real cases, to twist them, and then to fabricate new ones. Because if people understand, like, yes, there is a general problem with this, if there already are negative sentiments toward mobilization, toward enlistment officers, it's very easy to convince them that this new case is also true, that this case is also true, and create this image of just Ukrainian men being dragged by force to war by thousands.
So Russian propaganda, you said at this event, tried to create the idea of divided Ukraine. You mentioned this subject that Russian propaganda targeted mobilization. What are the, let's say, 3 most widespread fake news in Ukraine? And then we will talk about Eastern Europe and globally, fake news about the war in Ukraine.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily fake news, but like one common narrative that Russian propaganda really tries to use is that Ukraine is losing the war imminently, and it's difficult to call it fake news because nobody knows how the war will go. But it's the best way to create panic, especially in the frontline regions. And I know people who live in Dnipro, who live in places that are close to the front line, not really the frontline towns, but where they feel that the front is approaching. And there always Russian propaganda focuses really, really hard on creating panic, creating the sense that the front is collapsing, that the occupation is imminent, to make people leave, to make them lose faith in the authorities, in the military. The other thing is, I would say, the topic of corruption. And I think that this works both for Ukrainian audiences and for foreign audiences. And I think we've all seen this fake news about, let's say, Olena Zelenska buying herself a Lamborghini or buying herself some super expensive yacht. And this narrative is based on a claim that all the foreign aid that the West is sending Ukraine actually doesn't go to the war effort, that it's appropriated and used by the politicians, by the elite. It's, of course, all these fakes are nonsense, but they are very effective both at home at Ukraine, where it is known that corruption is a real issue, and also abroad, where it can very effectively target will to continue supporting Ukraine.
And is disinformation differently calibrated depending on, different social categories in Ukraine or different regions, or among, first of all, maybe Russian speakers as a target?
Yes, definitely. And it's still a little bit different how it was before the full-scale invasion and how it was now. So before the full-scale invasion, the sense of divided Ukraine that Russia tried to create was based, let's say, on language, on religion. Like, you have this half which is Ukrainian-speaking, who follow Greek Catholic Church, for example, and the south and the east, which is Russian-speaking, and which, as they want, as Russian propaganda try to present, is being oppressed by the West, by these nationalists, by the Banderites, and that's why they need our protection. What's happening now is that the dividing point is war and how different regions are affected by the war. So let's say the propaganda and disinformation that targets frontline regions tells the inhabitants, you are sitting here, bombs are falling on you, while the people in Western regions are staying safe. They are growing rich on the foreign aid, and effectively you are fighting and suffering for them. And in the Western regions, you instead say, these people from the East and Kyiv, they're trying to drag away your boys to fight in a war that is not really yours. And another aspect of this is that the war displaced many Ukrainians, not only those refugees who fled abroad, but also who fled to other regions of Ukraine. And this adds again to the tensions. Unfortunately, yes, even during my reporting, I experienced cases where locals in some, let's say, Western regions looked with distrust at the people who fled from the frontline regions. What adds to the situation is that sometimes these people flee from relatively wealthy cities, as Kharkiv, as Dnipro, and come to some countryside. And this like obvious wealth disparity just like flames the tension and provides kind of a good breeding ground for Russian propaganda.
And who combat fake news in Ukraine? As I said, in Romania, we do not have an institution to fight disinformation.
Yes, there are several NGOs or media like VoxCheck, Stop Fake, that are doing the classical fact-checking. You have also the Center for Countering Disinformation, which is a working body of the National Security and Defense Council. And then you have a lot of programs that are focused on media literacy, which I think is the most effective way to combat disinformation in Ukraine. I think that, as I said before, it's very difficult to combat this sheer volume of Russian propaganda by simply fact-checking. You need to teach people how to spot fake news. You need to, and especially I would say in regions which are closer to the front line and to the socially and economically weaker groups, because they're obviously most vulnerable to Russian propaganda.
And the authorities have the power to combat fake news, to fight with disinformation.
Yes, like there is, let's say there is this body, this Center for Countering Disinformation, and their task is simply, they have a Telegram channel and social media where they debunk most widespread Russian disinformation. And of course, Russian propaganda is blocked in Ukraine, and already before the full-scale invasion, there was this media empire of a pro-Kremlin oligarch, Medvedchuk, and it was shattered even before the full-scale invasion began. So yes, Ukraine recognizes that Russian propaganda is effectively a tool of aggression. It's a tool of war aimed against Ukraine. It's not about media censorship, it's about fighting for your survival. It's against protecting your country against destabilization as much as you can.
And what are the main disinformation topics in Eastern Europe or globally when it comes to the war in Ukraine? What fake news are being spread on this topic, the war in Ukraine?
So globally, one common topic is, for example, that Russia is unbeatable and there is no point in helping Ukraine because Russia won all the war in history and you can't beat it, which is of course nonsense. Russia lost the Crimean War, the Russo-Japanese War, World War I, and history shows us time and again that yes, when there is a united effective opposition, Russia can be beaten. But unfortunately, yes, when you contrast Ukraine and Russia, for many foreigners who don't know the context, it is very easy to just believe and that all the aid that we're sending is for nothing. And if when you mention the regional topics, so yes. What's happening now, and I observed this, let's say, in Poland, really, really targeted propaganda that uses that targets Ukrainian refugees and the historical grievances. So you have a lot of painful history, let's say, between Poland and Ukraine related to World War II, to the Volyn massacres, and Russia is very much targeting this now and is trying to rid Ukraine of all its allies that supported it since the outbreak of the full-scale invasion.
What would you answer to those who say the war in Ukraine doesn't exist?
This was always the most baffling thing to me, because there is such just staggering amount of content that you can just watch and verify that yes, the war is really happening. And I think in this case, the people just need to rethink what kind of media they consume. And as long as you just select several media outlets that verify their news, that have a proper editorial oversight, you will learn about what's going on in Ukraine on a daily basis. And unfortunately, yes, I think some people really try intentionally to shut their eyes from the war in Ukraine.
Because maybe it is too painful to see
Yes.
to see this reality.
Yes, I think that there is a certain kind of fatigue among parts of the population, and it's not just people who say there is no war. They just don't want to hear about it anymore. It's just, it's not comfortable. You feel that, yes, you invested enough emotions, you did what you could, and the war is still going on, so you would better if the topic just disappear from the media headlines.
You live in Ukraine, a country at war. What do you feel if somebody will tell you in front of your face, the war does not exist, it is not something real? What do you feel?
It is frustrating, of course, and I would just like to, please come visit. I will pay you for a hotel. Come take a look. You just spend a day or two in the country, and I think, yes, if the person is open-minded and open to facts, then they will change their mind within a day or two. If not, if they want to delude themselves that all of this is a staged psyop or anything like this, I think it's very difficult to reach these people. And I honestly don't have an answer when somebody very actively chooses to ignore evidence when it's right in front of their faces.
Russian propaganda adapts to people's different vulnerabilities, so people become much more to believe it. How can you recognize it, Russian propaganda? I mean, what should attract our attention when it comes to Russian propaganda?
So I would say that there are two kinds. Let's say the most obvious one, the most basic one, you can just spot by some basic buzzwords. If you talk about neo-Nazi junta in Kyiv and Zelensky regime and specifically focusing, let's say, on a person of Zelensky, and it is his war and it is his responsibility, and he is dragging men into war and he doesn't want to accept war, you can understand that this is here obviously very targeted but low quality Russian propaganda that targets specific audiences that, let's say, don't know so much about the topic. What is more sophisticated, I would say, is media that, claims that are sort of believable because they are based on something, on some real issues, real events. One fact check we did recently was that I think a couple of weeks ago there was an explosion at the refinery here in Romania, Lukoil refinery, if I remember correctly. Then there was another explosion in Hungary. And then appeared news that, there was a third explosion in Slovakia. And this claim was spread both by Russian propagandists and by even some high-profile pro-Ukrainian people on social media who thought it believable, and immediately there started speculation about Ukraine is carrying out sabotages against Russian-linked refineries on European soil. Of course, the third explosion never happened. It was completely fabricated. And this is, I think, the most tricky to spot. And I was surprised myself how quickly some people who should know better believed it. So I think in this case, it's always better to remember if the news evokes some kind of emotional response. If you feel that, yes, it targets certain your emotions, be it excitement, be it anger, frustration, always double check, have a list of verified media that you believe, and if you see that they reported on it differently or they did not report on it, then it's quite likely that this is a fake and misinformation.
We talked about the Ukrainians. How do you find young Ukrainian? Are they easily manipulated, maybe on TikTok or on Telegram?
I would say that I saw both faces, or I see two faces of Ukrainian youth. On one hand, there is this Euromaidan generation who, since basically their teens, were very heavily invested in the idea of independent Ukraine. There is this kind of patriotic fervor that I, for example, have not observed in my own home country. And this idealism is something I think really inspiring, that helped the country a lot in moving away from this heritage of Russian control, of Russian rule, people who actively consume Ukrainian media, they seek out Ukrainian media, Ukrainian cultural context, movies, etc. But also there is this generation is also kind of easy target. The younger generation is also easy target for, let's say, propaganda spread on TikTok, and this is becoming quite an issue, especially Russian language TikTok. And it's not just about disinformation. One kind of problematic thing that's happening now, that it's targeting specifically teenagers who are from poor regions, let's say, or from poorer economic social backgrounds, is that they are being offered quick money by FSB or GERU officers, on Telegram, if they, for example, just place a backpack in in some building, in some police station or military facility. The backpack they are placing has a bomb. Their Russian intelligence handler blows it off while they're doing it, kills them, causes damage. This spreads terror, fear, and anxiety among population anywhere in Ukraine. And unfortunately, yes, there is an active campaign trying to target specifically young Ukrainians, teenagers. There is of course effort from the state to counter this, to improve media literacy. But it remains a problem.
I don't know if these young people are a part of the silent majority that you spoke on the event. How can you reach those people who don't really have an opinion about Russian propaganda or about the war in Ukraine? And why this silent majority is important, not only in Ukraine, but globally, in Eastern Europe?
I think it's the issue that there will always be part of population that you can't reach, or it's very difficult to reach, who are really make their views, let's say, Russian friendly, pro-Russian views part of their identity. They, I think, without some really traumatic experience, they will not change their opinion. So yes, we as a journalist, we have to leave this bubble of people who we know read us, who we know agree with us, and will support Ukraine no matter what. And yes, try to reach other people. The silent majority. When it comes, since we are English language media, we try to work mainly with foreigners. And I think our task is to explain the topic of Ukraine and the war in terms that people abroad can relate to. So yes, if you talk to an American, I think you have to explain that yes, we are fighting for liberty. We're fighting to stop Russian imperialism. I think that these are just topics and terms that American audience, having come from the Cold War, they should understand. Or if we talk with Europeans who. For whose the fact that Europe managed to defeat Nazi Germany and Hitler, and now again there is another aggressor and we need to stop him. It's just the idea of making them care in terms that they will be able to relate to.
It's important for media to reach this, to target this silent majority. What can the media do to combat disinformation, or what tools should media improve to fight disinformation?
I would say yes, the key will always be media literacy, and this is a matter of collaboration between journalists, NGOs, and the state. And as I said already, mainly developing media literacy in among vulnerable populations. And as far as it's also about that it's constantly a race in technology, because Russian propaganda is now really good at using AI and of course social media for a long time, and it's constantly adapting. So the same thing, media that fight disinformation must figure out how to adapt to the technological progress, which is getting faster and faster and faster. And in that moment, it's also a matter of resources. And as I said already before, when one side invests enormously more resources, when has access to much more resources than your side, it is difficult to keep the pace. which is, I think that, like, yes, Western governments, European Union, they need to understand the dangers of disinformation, and they need to understand the importance of helping independent media fight it.
So media must be where disinformation already exists, already is.
Yeah. I mean that just understanding the tools that they are using, and once Russian propaganda uses en masse AI deepfakes, immediately we need to adapt to it. We need to give people tools how to spot these spot deepfakes, how to spot that something is AI content, and just keep people updated on the latest techniques that Russian propaganda uses. And I think like this will be like a non-stop fight.
I don't know if the journalists are ready for this, because everything is happening so fast.
Yes. And it's also because there's this disadvantage that as a serious media you have, that you need to verify, you need to put in effort, you need to put in work. And how do you combat somebody who just uses army of bots to just spew huge amounts of propaganda? Yes. When you're competing with machines, it's becoming quite difficult. So I think like the future of fact-checking and disinformation is also implementing and introducing like modern technologies to combat like technologies that are being used for disinformation.
I'm sure you've experienced moments when you feared for your life in Ukraine. Would you be willing to share such a moment with us, if you could, of course?
I would say I'm more lucky than others, since living in Lviv, there are less frequent attacks than attacks in Kyiv. But yes, there have been several heavy strikes and deadly ones. And it's this moment when you're sitting in the shelter and in your car, and you hear this like thumps far away, and you are unsure in that moment if it's like garage door opening or something, and suddenly like everything becomes shaking and you realize that it's hitting not far away from you. And it is a haunting feeling. I don't know how to describe this. I think that you just realize how the things that were before the war that we like were problematic and difficult for us, how they kind of pale to the idea that you know that your loved ones can be killed the next day.
Yes.
And everything, like your value system kind of changes when you live in a country at war.
What are your current fears from a journalistic point of view, or for freedom, democracy point of view?
There was active pressure from the authorities against independent media in response to certain investigations into government misconduct, and it comes and goes in waves. Usually there is then pushback from like European partners, from civil society, and it is actually really good that this shows that in Ukraine there is a healthy civil society, healthy media system, because this pressure works. Media are confident, they know that if they feel this pressure, they can fight back. The problem is that sometimes when media fight back, there can be divided opinion among both Ukrainian public and the Western public, because some people say, look, it's war, why are you criticizing the government right now? It casts bad light on them, you are doing Russia a service. And I think this is completely wrong, because freedom of media is one of the main values, one of the values that we are fighting for here. And just putting this stuff putting this under the carpet is something that I think would bite us in the ass afterward, because like I think truth usually comes out, and if it just turned out that like yes, Ukraine government was doing this misconduct and was doing these abuses, and there was just no pushback and it was done without any oversight, it will then cast much worse light on Ukraine.
Give us a tool to successfully combat disinformation.
I would say rather than a tool, it is simply the matter of media hygiene. I think that the biggest problem of the media landscape today, and which is also promoted by owners of like social media companies, this idea that legacy media is dead. I think that's nonsense, and I think what might happen that people will now, with the amount of fake news and AI-generated content, will finally start to appreciate the value of actual newsroom, of actual editorial oversight, and like they will realize that yes, this fast news doesn't bring us the real value that we wanted. We need actually journalists on the ground giving us real verified information that goes through proper fact checking. So I think that like rather than just tool, it is yes, find sources that you believe and be at least suspicious of all the rest that you see on social media, on X, etc.
I want to ask you to complete this sentence, if you want. Maybe, what would you add, Martin Fornusek, when the war is going to be over?
There will be a better future for Ukraine, I hope. I think this is what we're all hoping for, and because we don't know how the war will end, and it's really important to know that this was worth something, that there will be a better future for Ukraine, that there will be Ukraine which will be free, independent, capable of choosing its future, and capable of becoming healthier and better society.